everybody, it's Drybear. Yesterday, I went over some developer mentions on the game in general, and one of the topics was around the idea of progression wipes. Now, they have been very obtuse and trepidatious over talking about wipes, progression wipes, and resets. And even with their posts, they've also just been kind of non-committal on it. So what I thought was best yesterday is I kind of went through like a very vague description of what they want to do. However, it seems from the comments yesterday that that might be doing more harm than good. So what I'm going to do is talk about the exact things they've talked about for the progression system. But I do want to emphasize again that they've been very hesitant on this. They've mentioned several times that this is probably going to change, and they don't know what it's going to look like when it finally gets there. But let's put some meat and potatoes on the table for the people that are saying, well, wait a minute, they did kind of talk about it, and there's a little bit here and there. So if you're wondering what has been said so far, let's dive into progression wipes and resets for Arc Raiders. So from their official blog post, which I can link down below if you want to read all of it, they're definitely, from the design director mentioning that all of this is subject to change between now, launch, post-launch, and anything in between. They're also just going to be monitoring it and where they're at is on the system overall. They mentioned this is a complex topic. I mean, a lot of games have been like bouncing back and forth on this idea. We've seen Once Human bounce around on what they do for resets and seasonal servers. ARPGs have in the past. There are a lot of people that don't play ARPGs because of the seasonal system, where they don't like losing their character even though they're not forced to. They don't like having to start over constantly. There's also a lot of people, I've seen comments on Arc Raiders where people say that if you take my gear away, I'm uninstalling. I don't take my gear away, don't reset. And there's definitely a lot of extraction games that do scheduled forced restarts where you lose everything and everyone starts over together, which to some is fun, to others is not. So they say this is a complex topic. We'll be keeping an eye on the discussion around this message and follow up as necessary. So even with the system they're showing here, they're recognizing that they might change it. It might look completely different. And even if the first system they launch is the way it is, they might even adapt from there and change it completely again. They also mentioned they see the benefits of a global wipe in general. Veteran players can experience the game fresh, the economy is reset to the baseline, and all players have about the same level of capabilities, at least for a little while. This is actually super important for loot-based games in general. This happens in all kinds of games, but in loot-based games especially, you get the haves and the have-nots. It's feast or famine. A lot of people that are very far ahead can be very strong, and if you're going into a match where everyone has been playing for a couple months and they have everything they need, it starts to get harder and harder to run free loadouts because the people you're running against have purple legendary quality weapons that do a lot more damage and are way more threatening. So you end up in these awkward situations where, that's why resets exist, is that people get too bloated. They need to be brought back down to baseline. And for a lot of people that enjoy the reset mechanic, it is fun because what you don't lose when you reset is your knowledge and experience. And so it's kind of like let's see how fast I can speed run to getting back to parity to what I was before. And let's see what it feels like to have weaker weapons or weaker augments or weaker shields or no consumables like we did when we first started running. But for the people that care about this, for all the people out there on my videos saying if they take my stuff away, I'm quitting or I'm uninstalling, I'm refunding, they do have a very big note on this. Mandatory wipe does not respect the investment of those players who do not have as much time to play overall. And I think this resonates with a lot of at least a significant cohort inside of tactical games, extraction games, loot-based games, is they don't play 8 hours a day. They're not a content creator. They're not a streamer. They're not someone with a lot of free time. They either have responsibilities or a family or something like that. They play when they can, but because they're not playing as much during the reset cycle, by the time they get to the end, when the mandatory wipe comes, they don't even have that much. So they didn't even really snowball at all. And then by the time the reset comes, they lose it all again. And they're just like, okay, screw it, I'm done, right? So this is a very poignant aspect to resets in general. And so, as we have done with several other mechanics, before mimicking other established mechanics, we'd like to try our own method. So again, very hesitant to lock themselves down to anything. They're saying, hey, this is the system we're thinking about. If it works, we're going to keep it. If it doesn't, we'll go with the methods that other similar genres use, but this is what we're thinking. Like, again, very hesitant. Ideally, at the end, the system that best suits Arc Raiders and a large majority of players is the one that they're going to be using. So again, more caveats and asterisks being added to this. All right, so shut up, Drybear, stop yapping. Tell us what the system is. So what they're thinking of is they're calling it Expeditions. So this is what you see on screen here. Now, the bones of this is essentially a prestige system, but it has the housing of a seasonal reset that is functionally a prestige system. So what they're thinking is an 8-week cycle. So, 2 months, that kind of 8-week cycle where you start and then you play through to the end, and you'll be collecting materials, getting stronger, extracting, getting all those other elements. And by the end of it, there will be like a checklist of delivered items like springs, wires, coils, batteries, like you're collecting materials and submitting them to Speranza. And once you finish all of those tasks by giving up willingly items to the expedition, you will have the option to complete the expedition and start over with the next cycle. Now they say here you have to reach a certain level. This may or may not be the same. I think this is probably already changed because 15 was the max before. So again, these numbers are all going to be fungible, but in general, you get to max level, you progress through it, submit extra materials that you normally would use, and then you get to option to personally opt into a reset that takes away your gear and items and resets you back to baseline. So operate on an 8-week cycle, and during these 8 weeks, you can contribute those rewards towards the project. At the start, the ability to finalize the project will become available and remain available for the entire week. So the start of the last week. So basically, you have 7 days at the end of the 8-week cycle where you can turn in and finalize and graduate, basically. You can graduate or prestige up to the next stage. If a player has fulfilled all the stages of the project, they will be able to commit to completing the expedition during the end of that 8-week cycle. There's questions around like, what if you want to do it early or you're going on vacation or whatever? There's a lot of like, just date things. Like, again, like what if you're not online for that 7-day period and you miss it, even though you wanted to graduate to the next expedition? There's going to be questions around that. But that's only for if you wanted to graduate, but you weren't online, right? There's obviously a situation where either you didn't want to graduate or you hadn't completed all the quests that you needed to get done, all the turn-in materials you need to get done. So if for whatever reason at the end of the cycle, if you decide that you don't want to complete your expedition and opt in for the reset, or you haven't finished all the requirements, it will be kept and carry over to the next 8-week cycle for the next expedition. So you don't lose anything for that. So you'll start working on the next project. Your progress will be kept until the next finalization window. I still think there's going to be this situation where, like, I feel like you should be able to complete the expedition at any point during the process. This is very true. Like all these, the tons of online games, you play MMOs where they have like a certain boss is only available in the evenings. But what if you have obligations that make it so you can't be online at that time and you can't do the boss, so you never get to complete it? Ultimately, with these systems, over the long haul, the designers end up just making it available all the time because it's unreasonable with a large player base to expect them to be online and ready at the same time. A week period is pretty long, but still there's going to be complaints and that sort of thing. But they say that if you, for whatever reason, either you don't want to graduate or you decide you haven't finished the requirements, it'll just roll over until the next and you'll keep your progress. Which I think also begs a lot of questions too, because like, if you never interact with the system, it feels like it's kind of odd that it's even there in the first place. It's not fully integrated, right? I'm sure there's going to be players that never want to reset. They want to keep everything they have, and they just never go to the expedition screen, even if they get notifications for it, like pop-ups and CTAs in the window on the main menu. It says, hey, your expedition's ready. And you're like, I don't care. Stop bugging me. I'm never going to reset. This system just doesn't exist for me. They also mentioned that other projects may be added over time as updates, holidays, and other events. Sometimes games will do like limited run or like special battle passes that go along with these kind of grind events or turn-in events. There also could be like community contribution events where everyone has to, based on how many expeditions get completed in the community, there's like community rewards and whatever. And there's also going to be like, at certain points, the developers may want to incentivize players to de-bloat their inventories if they're going to be adding in new weapons or new things to grind. You want to get, stronger attrition right before that, just so they have room to be able to do the new stuff and engage with it. And this will range in scale with reward and structure. So again, very broad, general, high-level descriptions with no actual details here. But they mentioned that they might have, aside from this proposed 8-week schedule, they might have additional, like, maybe 2-week run, 4-week run, special holidays, Christmas, Halloween, Easter or something like that, like the special Easter special, go around and find Easter eggs inside of raider caches all over the map and turn them in to get special cosmetics. They also have some footage here. This looks like just kind of a basic mock-up, but you can see here, this is the screen that you would see. These are the quests and steps you have to do. So you see Foundation 1 out of 6, so a 6-stage setup. You can see under my big fat head too, they have like a mock-up for a timer here too. So this would be the final week of the 8-week set up with 5 days remaining. You have all these like metal parts, rubber parts, arc alloy, battery, wires, cooling fan. So it's an attrition system. They're trying to get you to turn in those materials and complete the progress. And this is what you would need to do to complete the expedition. So you can see at the top here, at least in this mock-up, this obviously isn't final, but in the top left, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of these entries. So a good amount of materials. You'd probably have to spend a weekend or maybe a week getting all of these and only turning them in, depending on how good you are at extracting. So grabbing these and turning them in. And then once you have all of that done, you can complete the expedition and nuke your character and start over. The next natural question is what gets lost and what gets kept? So if I decide to turn in all my materials instead of crafting and playing the dang game, if I decide to do that and I want to do the reset, I probably will. I think it's fun to reset and start over. And we'll see we'll talk in a second what those incentives might be. But the question is what gets lost and what gets kept? So players will lose anything inherent to their character's progress. I think the most obvious, obviously, is items in inventory, right? That's what you would expect because that's kind of what they're trying to target, is the bloat of people holding on to too many items, like hoarders, basically. That's kind of the primary reason for a reset. But what's in here as well is levels, skills, workshop, and crafting capabilities. Now, you probably felt this during the server slam, where we can only put our workbench to level 2, which means all of the green and blue materials became useless because we couldn't combine them. There's also a thing about the tech test 2 that people that only played the server slam don't realize, and that is in the tech test 2, when you had the maximum level of workbenches and stuff, you could actually, not only could you salvage to go down in materials, which you could in the server slam, right? Take a green item and salvage it into plastic parts or metal parts. In like the full version of the game, when you have upgraded workbenches and all of that, you can craft upwards too. Like you can actually go to a workbench or a vendor and take green items and combine them to make a blue item that's a crafting material. And the fact that you can go up and down the tiers in crafting materials is huge. So, you know, losing that on a reset, it's pretty big. I think there's definitely going to be some discussions on how many of these items should be reset. You know, obviously, you know, doing a full reset, meaning you lose your character level, which means you lose your talent tree, you lose your ability to craft in round, you lose your stamina bonuses, you lose all of them, you lose the things that you've picked up and passives and bonuses and stuff like that. Your workshops reset, so you can't craft and things like that, and then the crafting capabilities and everything. So this whole list here, again, with the etc. and their wishy-washy approach to this, I'm guessing some of these are up for debate on whether they actually will have this in the final version or not. But let me know what you think about this. Like, which of these should be included? I mean, the fact that it's optional is good. It means that people that don't like resets don't have to partake in the system at all. I have a Bloodborne flashback from Let Me Partake, if anyone remembers that enemy. But there's a question of like, should levels be part of the reset? Should the skills be part of the reset? Should you lose your workshop progression? Should you use your crafting capabilities? Should all these be part of the reset or not? Let me know in the comments. The question is what gets kept as well, and legally anything that you spend money on, they can't take away from you. They get into a lot of legal trouble if they do that. So anything that you've purchased specifically or spent real money on will be preserved, and they have to do that. That's not up for debate. They can't choose to do that. They will get into legal trouble if they start taking paid things away. So all of your cosmetics, deluxe edition items, any cosmetics that you've built or purchased will be kept as part of your account. But additionally, anything that you've earned through playtime will be kept too. So skins, attachments, backpacks, hairstyles, customization options, things that are earned will be kept too, as well as awards and achievements and rankings. So things that you've done by playing will be kept as part of that. So anything rooted solely in the metagame, which I don't know about this wording, because they say anything solely rooted in the metagame, but then they also talk about levels and skills, things that are meta progression, like above a single match, that does get lost. So this is a little confusing in this phrasing here, but you know, maybe it makes more sense to you than it does for me. So you keep all your cosmetics, you keep all your skins, you keep your achievements and your awards and everything, but all your workbenches get reset to level 1, your level gets set to level 1, you lose all your talents, your entire inventory and all your items are wiped, and you're set back to level 1. Now, a good follow-up to this is, you know, what about all the account level requirements, tutorials, quests, animations, cutscenes? Like, is it going to boot me back to the intro cutscene and I'm going to have to figure out how to breach the hatch on a car, or I'm going to get attacked and I have to learn how to use a bandage again? So they thought through this, at least. Like, that's kind of the bare minimum. After completing the expedition, players will be able to skip the majority of the onboarding and tutorial steps they went through as a new player. So it's kind of interesting that they phrased it this way too, because that tells me that rather than just saying like, hey, it's just a flat reset of like, hey, they're taking items away, it sounds like it's at like an account level. Like they're kind of, you know, ad hoc setting your account back to level 1, but keeping your earned items and purchase cosmetics, and then allowing you to skip tutorials. So it does feel like it's like a full reset outside of that. This being things like unlocking certain features, maps, and as they play through the early game, these will be available fresh from a fresh reset. So that's awesome. It means when you go to the Rust Belt and you see all the maps, you won't have to worry about the new player toggle that goes on your maps and prevents, you know, too many players from being in your match. The baby systems or restrictions and being able to go to all the maps will be there, and you'll still will have access to all that while being able to skip the tutorials, which I think is fine. It's kind of like a secondary auxiliary system. There'll be some players that engage with it, some players that don't, and I think having that reset is cool. Like you decide you can reset all of it. I almost, like, part of me wonders if it would be better if you kept your workbenches and kept your, like, your talent tree, and there's an option for resetting your inventory. Part of me just, you know, I enjoy the aspect of resetting, but the fact that I have to, you know, I guess it doesn't really take that long to progress to level 15 or level 20 or whatever they decide the final version of the max level is going to be. For me personally, I care more about the items and like your wealth as a character in your stash. But the idea of like having to grind through quest lines or upgrade workbenches or unlock talents again, that to me feels a little bit like excessive. Like I don't mind grinding games. I play tons of MMOs, Korean games, you know, just basic roguelites and stuff like that. I don't mind doing the same thing over and over and over again. I play Star Citizen, for God's sakes. I'm relatively immune to that. But at least for me in a game like this, I don't look forward to having to grind and unlock all of my talents every 8 weeks versus, you know, just getting better gear and, like, you know, being forced to use gear and weapons. That's the part that's interesting to me personally. And the next question, which is they haven't really given us any serious details on this in general, but the next question is, what do you get for it? Like, why would you want to do it? What's the incentive? Like, what's the carrot on the end of the stick that is encouraging players to do this reset in general? And there's a good reason they're wishy-washy on this right now, because, you know, the challenge is, and I've heard this, like, I've actually heard the developers mention this a few times, is they wanted to do, like, every time you do this expedition reset, this prestige system, you would get like an additional skill point for your talent tree. So instead of having to choose which part of the talent tree you get to get the whole talent tree over time. And that gets kind of weird, right? You can imagine a situation where you run up against an Arc Raider that has been playing for 10,000 hours and has more passive power than you do because they prestiged a lot. When you start getting into gameplay power, that gets kind of weird, especially in a system that already has disparity built in because of the loot system, right? If you have a free loadout and someone has a legendary sniper or something, that's already a disparity, and then you can further that disparity by adding prestige to it as well. So they mentioned that permanent account unlocks for each completed expedition, broadly mentioned. They don't give you details on what this is. Unique cosmetic rewards for each completed expedition. I think this is kind of what I would expect them to do. Like, you get a special skin or something like that. A lot of games do like golden skins or mastery skins or special skins, or Call of Duty, Battlefield, like special decals or textures that you put on your weapons, and little dongles and things in Valorant that hang off your weapons, stuff like that. Things that are just like signs of your achievements, but not actually any actual gameplay power. They also mention account buffs in quotes that are applied for the duration of the following expedition cycle, and if you do it multiple times, they may stack up to a limit. They don't tell us what these buffs are, but to the same point of getting power, like, can you imagine if, like, you got a buff that was like, you reload 10% faster for the next 8 weeks, or, you know, your crafting results yield more materials for the next 8 weeks, or, you know, you can kind of imagine what these buffs might be. If they are actually gameplay oriented, it does create an incentive structure where you're encouraged to do this expedition completion, right? So, like, it depends on how powerful those buffs are. If someone decides that they're not going to do the opt-in reset, it means they're intentionally refusing the buff. And if the buff is meaningful for how strong you are in the match, when you complete this and do it, if you don't do the expedition, you're hurting yourself or shooting yourself in the foot. So again, this kind of leads to a lot of questions of like, what buffs are we talking about? How powerful is it? Like, does it mean that you get to identify items faster for 8 weeks? Which might have a small impact, but in some cases, if you're looting a corpse out in the open of an enemy player or a bot that got destroyed out in the open, identifying faster means you're done looting faster, means you're out of danger faster. That has implications for gameplay, and so you're kind of encouraging the people that don't want to reset to reset. So, you know, if you guys have some kind of ideas of what you think the buffs might be if they do this, and the fact that they're stackable means even more incentive to reset, right? Like, say it's like 5% reload speed for the next 8 weeks, and then if you do it again, it's 10% reload speed for the next 8 weeks, and it stacks up. Like, these bonuses get better and better. Again, you're incentivizing people to do it, which de-incentivizes people from playing if they don't want to reset, because they'd be missing out on these buffs if they don't want to lose their items and their progression as well. So let me know what you think about these buffs. Any ideas you think the buffs might be? They might be super inconsequential, like, I don't know, they could do something cosmetic wise. They could do something where like it's very like doesn't have a major impact on gameplay. But if you're asking about buffs specifically, like bonuses or value you get from doing things, even if they're out of match, like how much materials Scrappy gives you, that does have an indirect impact on gameplay because you're getting more resources faster. Though granted, to get the buff, you did give up your items, so maybe it pays off that way. Or maybe, you know, you get more crafting yields or lower crafting costs. Things like that are pretty par for the course for these kinds of things. And the fact that it stacks is kind of interesting as well. So there could end up being some very big incentives for doing this, and you might be punished for not doing the reset. Then that's kind of just a question of what they're going to do with the final version. Now, they do make a blanket statement saying that they want to make sure that they're being careful about the nature of these benefits. Completing a reset should never give a player a power or combat advantage over anyone who has not completed a reset. And I think that this is, you know, it's good to say this in earnest, but also like if you're providing buffs, it's kind of hard to imagine buffs that don't have any, like that have a 0% impact, right? Because realistically, if a buff has 0% impact on your character, then why would you want it in the first place? They have to incentivize you somehow. And again, maybe they just focus on out of match crafting and materials, or maybe you get more quests or something like that. But either way, no matter what you do, it's going to create a have and have not situation. And any incentive you create for resetting means the people that don't reset won't get that incentive. So the buffs part may or may not change if they do commit to this philosophy here, where completing a reset shouldn't give you power. Then, you know, there's kind of a dichotomy there of like, okay, you know, if you're not going to give us anything valuable, then there's no incentive to reset. If there's an incentive to reset, then the people that don't are punished for it. It just kind of has that all there. So they're going to focus on cosmetics and bonuses, and then we'll have to see what they mean by buffs. They say initially, at least for the first version of this system, these benefits will center around cosmetics and bragging rights, quality of life, and smoothing out some aspects of progression for those who have gone through a reset. So quality of life is also kind of an asterisk there as well. Like, you could make an argument that some of the quality of life items in a competitive brain, any small advantage is an advantage, but we'll have to see. It seems like their goal is to make it, you know, you get the prestige of having done it, right? Some kind of, you know, thing you could show off to your friends or show off in a match or just look cool while doing it because you've done it. But it sounds like they're experimenting with other ideas on what they want to provide for that reset. Now, their mission statement here is that they want people who are highly engaged to get the option to get a fresh restart when they get too bloated or they get too bored, right? So the fact that they can start over is a fresh one. So they want to at least have the reset option for the people that like it. And they also want people that have less time to dedicate to the game, not have to worry about resetting their progress at weird intervals that doesn't fit their life and schedule. They'll always be able to keep moving forward and at their own pace if they choose, which, you know, in the system they've provided here, you could just completely ignore the expedition system, never go to that tab on the main menu, never turning in materials, and then you never worry about losing your progress. You're giving up whatever buffs you may be getting or cosmetics that are there, but if you are really vehement about not losing your stuff, then that's a fair trade-off. But what do you think? Should they do actual, like, forced resets, you know, on a schedule so everyone's in the same loop? One of the downsides with doing optional or opt-in resets, it means that, yes, the people that have a life and have responsibilities and obligations can play the game at their own pace without getting completely blown out for it. But it also means that when you leave that door ajar, the greedy hoarders are gonna, like the little loot goblins, are gonna sneak in through that opportunity, and they're also not going to reset, which means that you still have that issue where there are people that have everything they could ever want. Every time they start a match, they have a full loadout of the best gear in the game, and even if you go into a match and you do the free loadout, over time, maybe after a month or two or even a couple months, you're gonna run into a lot of people that have crazy loadouts every time you go topside. And so, the fact that it's optional means that it doesn't alleviate that issue of disparity growing wider and wider as time goes on. And that's why some games do forced resets to prevent the rich people that have too much stuff and perfect loadouts from punishing the people that want to go in with free loadouts. So they're going to have to monitor it, but let me know what you think about this. Do you think that this optional opt-in system is a good best of both worlds system and could work? That the people that want to reset can, the people that don't, and hopefully there aren't too many loot goblins that ruin the experience for others? Or do you feel like it's just too much of a half measure and it's not going to work in the end, that the loot goblins are going to take over and punish people, or there's going to be too much disparity, or the people that don't want to opt in just stop playing once they have a full stash and they're done and the player count ends up diminishing because of it? Where's your head at on that one? What do you think about this kind of, in between the Arc Raiders vibe? They like the Venn diagram approach. They want to get as many circles and hit them in the center as possible. Do you think that this system could work? If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.